it is in the act of walking that I think it was a radical act of self-awareness to remember that I needed to get back outside.
Hey, sweet mama. Welcome back to another episode of Mama Mindset. I'm your host and creator, Amy Cothran. Thank you so much for joining me again today. Today's episode is an interview episode with an absolutely incredible woman. I'm so excited to have her on the show. The story of how I have her on the show, or how I found her to bring her on the show, which she so graciously accepted to come on, it's incredible. It is crazy what the universe gives us and what the universe brings us. And if we can just listen to that. So I share that story in the podcast episode. And then I do dive a little bit further at the end of yet another sign that I had, and kind of this weird woo-woo moment of Libby coming into my life and me reaching out to her. So Libby is an incredible woman. She has spent her career in the ad world, a very successful career in the ad world. She co-founded the agency Mechanica. And so what she has accomplished right now, what we're talking about, is her book, which is sitting here behind me, Do Walk. And the Do series, the Do books are an entire series of books, but Libby wrote Do Walk based on an incredible experience that she has had in her life, and this phenomenal journey that she's been on and is still going on. This woman has walked consistently every single day for more than 10 years now. And now she shares it in this beautiful book form. And it's a journey. It's a story of her journey. It's also it's tips and tricks. And it really dives deep into the power of a walk and the feelings that you get, and how it can absolutely transform you, transport you, just change your life, change your mood in a very granular sense on a day-to-day basis. And Libby is able to articulate beautifully in her book, and also in this podcast episode, a lot of the thoughts and feelings that I have behind walking, that I know I just pound you guys with all the time, and just insisting that you continue to go on these walks and how important they are. But we really dive into the feelings of walking and the power of it and the beauty of it, what it can bring to our souls, what it can bring to our families as a household, if we include our kids or if we decide to go by ourselves. So do you wear earbuds? Do you not? Do you listen to a podcast? Do you not? Do you walk in the morning? Do you walk at night? We dive into all of the details of that, the best days, the best times to go walking. And we find out how Libby stayed consistent in her journey, how she didn't miss a day. It didn't matter what the weather was. It didn't matter how she was feeling. She had pneumonia and she got out there and walked, and she did it every single day. And I cannot wait for you to hear this journey that she is and was on, and how she's overcome all of these obstacles that are always put in front of her and us, in trying to talk that voice, trying to talk us out of staying consistent with something that we've told ourselves that we want to do and that we're going to do. So grab a cozy beverage and join me in this amazing conversational journey with Libby DeLana. Hi, Libby. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Oh, thank you so much. I've been listening to your podcast, and I think that this feels like a proper fit for you and me to have this conversation.
Yes, and I've been reading about you and listening to the other podcasts that you've been on too, and you're so eloquent in your words and in your writing that I'm just excited for my listeners to hear your story and hear this journey that you've been on. So that being said, why don't you take just a second, introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself for the audience.
Sure. My name is Libby DeLana. I live just north of Boston. I'm the mom to two very tall, I'm 6 feet. So one is 6'5" and the other is 6'6", two very tall, very kind, very generous young men. And they're in their mid-20s. I'm about to turn 60, which is hard to believe. I'm really happy about that. I happen to be anti-aging. I am just so grateful to be this age. So I don't have any anti about aging at all.
Mhm.
I spent 30 years in the ad world, in the ad business. I'm a art director by trade, so a creative director. And I think probably what we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking about is a practice that I've had for 10 years. And it was actually 10 years to the day on November 3rd that I went for a walk, and it's changed my life.
Mhm. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to now tell my story and how I found you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So welcome. Thank you. Let
Thank
me
you.
back up a little bit. Welcome. I'm so excited to hear about your journey and dive a little bit deeper. So, okay. So you wrote this incredible book, which I have sitting behind me, Do Walk, and it's amazing. But I found you in Magnolia Journal in the fall issue of this year. And I was sick. A lot of my listeners know that I came down with a head cold and I don't rest well, but I did go to my bed and rest. And I also don't get a chance to read magazines very much. And so I've had this magazine like lingering over my head and feeling guilty for not actually reading it. And so I picked it up and I opened it. And your article was the article that I opened it to. And I was totally entranced by this article, which you wrote. Somebody else didn't write it. You actually were the writer of this article. And I found your book immediately. And buy now. Thank you. I ordered it on Amazon. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you that.
No,
But I was
it's
like,
fine.
buy now. And I have to learn more about her because it is all about your experience and journey in walking. I mean, something as simple, but also so beautiful in walking. And so I bought your book. I was laying in bed and I reached out to you immediately and asked if you would come on the show, which I think you responded like that night or the next day, which I was like, yay, because in your article, and now that I've read your book, and I hope the listeners also, I'm obviously going to really encourage them to buy your book, but you so eloquently put into words and articulate exactly what I've been trying to tell these women and these moms on the podcast in the power of a walk. I mean, I have a whole podcast episode called The Power of a Walk because it's monumental. So why don't you talk to the audience or tell me a little bit about how you got started on this journey?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you found that article. It was sort of serendipitous. Somebody literally just reached out to me and said, would you like to do this? I honestly thought it was going to be a little column, one little, and there it ended up being 3 pages, which was very generous. In any case, 10 years ago, as I said, Mom, I just started an agency. We had about 40 employees. It was everything absolutely terrific. I was counting my blessings, very fortunate. And what I realized was that most of my days, although wonderful, filled with conference calls and going to meetings and caring for my family and so on, there was something that was really missing. Excuse me. And that, after some inquiry, took me a minute to figure it out, was that actually being outside is where I'm happiest. And it was an essential part of who I was growing up. I spent a lot of time outside with my friends, camping, backpacking. And so I just paused for a minute and realized, despite that I had absolutely nothing to be upset about, nothing to complain about, there was a little bit of a hole. And I wasn't as fully myself as I could be. And I knew that by getting back outside, I'd be nourished in a different way than I was as a mom and as a working mom and as a business owner. So I just committed, literally starting on November 3rd. It was Dad's birthday, so it was a sort of a great kickoff day. And I thought, well, I'm literally just gonna go outside and go for a walk. And the intention was not the walk. It wasn't exercise. It wasn't weight loss. It wasn't a workout. It was really, I just need to be outside. I need to be outside in the weather. I'm very fortunate. I live near the beach, so I needed the smell of the ocean and seeing the seasons change. And in some ways it was about slowing down. I don't think I realized it initially, but things were busy, things were happening fast. I wasn't moving at the natural speed of the natural world
Mm-hmm.
because you're in cars, and as you walk, you are in sync with the natural world. So I decided that I'd commit to doing that walk for an entire month, and there was no reason I couldn't go. I didn't matter if I was tired, didn't matter if it was raining, didn't matter if it was snowing. I just said every day go for a walk.
No
Now,
excuses.
no excuses.
Yeah.
And but what was also part of that was it didn't matter how far. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
about 10,000 steps. It wasn't about how fast. I wasn't measuring data, although I very easily, that's the kind of personality I have. I could have very easily worn a Fitbit or Apple or something to track all that, but I knew I was really sort of looking for something else. It was not about all that data.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that, you know, there's no good or bad in this. There have been times where I'm like, oh, I'm just sort of curious. So I track my mileage, but that's not the focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I just needed to be very thoughtful and mindful about really what my intention was. And my intention was to get outside and to be in the natural world. And so here I am 10 years later. I've never missed a day. Now, that being said, there are certainly days when I've been sick where I've literally walked around the block. But I don't judge myself about that. It's just it's more about the decision and putting
Mm-hmm.
on the shoes and making sure I get and do it.
Right.
And in a way, I like to describe it as an incredibly radical act of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
So you beautifully pointed out the thing about walking that's so powerful is that it is so simple. If we are able-bodied, of which I
Mm-hmm.
am, and I'm incredibly grateful for, it's so simple. You don't need a gym membership. You don't need a time slot on the mat. And there's nothing wrong with either of those either. But I think in a busy world, and maybe especially for moms, whether you are working in or out of the house, um, the ease, the not having to make an appointment, time
Mm-hmm.
is an important give. If you can go for 20 minutes, great. If you can go for 10, great.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be monumental. It doesn't have to
Right.
be a full get on your clothes, get to a class and come home, although that's great too.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's sort of the sort of framework of it. And I will say that I have learned, and really that the book is about what I've learned along the way. And I now call it a practice, much like a seated meditation practice. It's really a much more of a meditative act than it
Mm-hmm.
is a workout.
Yeah.
I spent a good deal of my life as an athlete, and I have to say the first literally took me 2 years to get over my athletic ego when I started to think, what are you doing? You're not even
Mm-hmm.
running. You're not. And slowly, I was able to calm that part of my persona.
Mm-hmm.
And
That
really,
drive to do more, like the
the drive,
drive to do more instead of just slowing down and accepting the now and the
that's right.
slowness. Yeah.
That's beautifully said. Right. There is that sort of, oh, how many steps? Did I lose any weight? And every time I cut, and that's not the motivation for me.
Right.
And but it's taken time to learn
Mm-hmm.
that. And so, I've also found it in many ways, my best therapist,
Mm-hmm.
these walks. So it's
Yeah.
really been had a profound impact. And I think, again, the piece that's so amazing is that such a simple act, the act that makes us human,
Mm-hmm.
walking,
Mm-hmm.
can have such a transformative impact.
Yes. Okay. So that is so beautiful. And so you said you've been doing it for 10 years, which is amazing, but you've also walked the globe, right? You
I
did the
have.
math,
Yeah. So again, I don't really
like
keep
rough
track.
math. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was about November of 2019. And of course, I love beautiful numbers. So what's coming up is 1/1/2020. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I should just figure out how many miles I've done, roughly how many miles I've done. And what I realized is that actually almost I don't want to say precisely, because again, I'm not really keeping track, but I know I was like, oh my gosh, on 1/1/2020, I think I will have walked 25,000 miles. And that is the circumference of the earth. And I've done it basically. I mean, I'm fortunate that with work and so on, I've traveled quite a bit, but basically it's in my backyard
Mhm.
and in the streets in my community. So yeah, 25,000 miles, which is roughly the circumference of the earth, which
That's
I just want to
amazing.
say that while that sounds impressive and I'm very proud of it, I definitely, there are many people in my life who have done that. And I don't mean that to minimize what I've done, but there are a lot of runners and a lot of people, hikers and so on, who've done it. But for me, it was a mile marker that was kind of, it felt like a hug.
Yeah.
And felt,
Well, doing hard things is relative too. And
yeah,
so,
that's
you
right.
think about these ultra
Beautiful.
marathon runners and
Yeah.
you think about these insane, intense athletes and the things that they've accomplished. But you can't say that they've accomplished more and you've accomplished less because
No.
they haven't necessarily done what you've done. They haven't
Yeah.
walked in with intention. You're walking with intention every single day to get up and get moving every single day for 10 years, so everybody's heart is relative, everybody's
That's
challenges
right.
are relative. And I'm not saying like walking in itself is challenging, but the act of getting up and sticking to something that you committed to doing and making a promise to yourself and then doing that over and over and over again, that's challenging for anybody. I
Mm,
don't care what
yeah.
kind of an athlete you are, what you've done in your life. So it's monumental for you and it would be monumental for anybody too.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's beautifully said. It's not the act of walking that's hard. It's the keeping the commitment and that promise to
yeah.
yourself. And I've really found that it's often on the days where I really don't want to go. And
Mhm.
even after 10 years, there's a few days it's like really stormy out. I'm kind of got the grumps, big time grumps. And
Mhm.
I've come to learn, thankfully, over these 10 years, that it's in fact those days that I don't want to go, that it's the most profound day. It's the day I need to go. And
Yes.
I've learned that. So when that little voice, and she's sexy and she's smart and she's very articulate, and she says, you know what, rest, you should rest. You don't need to, you've done it for 10 years, take a break. When I hear
Mhm.
that voice, I know, oh, I see you. I see you.
Mhm.
And I understand that, but I actually know that now, that it is on those days that I honestly have sometimes the sort of most monumental breakthroughs, the biggest breakthroughs, the most impact. Tell me about your walking practice, though. Tell me
Yeah.
about you.
Yeah. So, the girls and I, my favorite time of year to walk is in the winter when
Mhm.
it is rainy and cold. And so the girls and I take them with me most of the
Beautiful.
time. And so last winter was when we really kind of dove in, like we really went in and we walked almost every single day. And I would put Lily on my back and she was 1.5. So I would carry her. And then I have, the other two young ones, they were 6 and 4 at the time. And we live rural also. So I'm very fortunate and incredibly grateful to be able to walk on our county road. And we have some big hills though. So it's not flat. We're in Idaho. So we
Yes.
have some big hills to go up and down and it's challenging. So we got out almost every day. And unless it was weather that I thought was not safe for the girls to be
Sure.
in, we still went. I'm talking rain, snow, freezing rain. We went out. It didn't matter what temperature it was. We just put on more layers, which I think is
Right.
actually easier to do in the winter than it is in the summer, which is why
I
I
agree.
prefer walks in the fall and winter. It's much more difficult to take a child out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when it's 100 degrees, and then it becomes
100%.
actually, not safe. So,
Mhm.
and as an adult, it's one thing, but when you have small children, it's another. And so
Oh,
I'll tell you some of the best days that we had were the days that were the most challenging.
sure.
And it's not to say that the kids were happy in the challenge. We had challenging days and they had great attitudes, but we had challenging days where they had shitty attitudes. So now as a mom, you're like, I don't want to be out here necessarily. And now all three kids are crying and they're not hurt, they're not in danger, they just don't want to do it. So it's a learning opportunity to push through. And I mean, I have 3 girls and I want to raise strong, independent women. And for me, one of the best ways I can do that is by taking them on a walk in nature's natural environment and
It's beautiful.
show them how you can do this. Like,
Yeah.
and there's an end in sight. Also, I usually do cocoa.
Yeah,
Let's go back and
totally.
do cocoa. As
Yeah.
moms, we'll do coffee or tea. I know you're a tea drinker. So
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
a reward, there's an end to it. And that's what I always tell them. Just one foot in front of the other. I don't expect you to go fast. I expect them to keep up and not lollygag, but it's not a race. We put one foot in front of the other. And at the end, it's done. It's over
Yeah.
with, and we get
That's right.
our warm beverage. So,
Yeah.
but we also
That's
walk in we walk in the spring and summer too. We just have to go earlier. But, just kind of adding on to what you were saying about that inclement weather, like those are some of the most impactful days for me, and the most memorable. When I was walking with the girls last winter, we went up, and this was borderline, like we maybe should have gone back to the car, but we were still fine. Like we weren't hurt. They were just they were getting cold because we went up on the Palouse where the wind was blowing the snow, and it was like snow and freezing rain. And so it was, it hurts your cheeks a little bit.
yes.
It really
Yeah.
does. And so we didn't walk real far, but we got our walk in, and then we went back, and they were talking about how much they like, we don't like this. We want to go back to the
Yeah.
car, but we got through and everybody was fine. And we got in the car, we stopped at a coffee shop and got cocoa and coffee, and it was fine. And they remember that now. And they say, remember that
Sure.
time we did something really
We did
hard?
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
think it's so powerful, your daughters joining you and seeing you
mhm.
do it. And I think that's actually how brave, strong women are raised, as they see their parents and their moms do it. So
Mhm.
I'm glad you're doing that. And
Thank you.
I think the other piece that's, as you said, you point out, it's just about getting out. You don't have to go out for 2 or 3 hours. And if we are fortunate to be able to say, I'll be home in an hour, I'm going to take off all these wet clothes and throw them in the dryer. I'm safe, I'm dry. I might be wet right now, but I'm soon enough, I'll be warm.
Mhm.
And that's exactly my mindset is, sometimes get out there and I turn around and the headwind is really blowing like stink. And in fact, this happened about 2 weeks ago. I went out on my usual walk and I knew there was a little bit of I had a little tailwind going. And I thought, I turned around, it's going to be windy, but it was really blowing. And it is such a beautiful sort of reminder, as you just said, that even when you have a headwind, physical outdoors headwind, or an emotional headwind, or something that's hard, it's really the only thing you can do is stay really present and take each step as it comes. You
Mhm.
can't get too far ahead of yourself. You can't start to worry about things. You just have to take that next step. And I think, your daughters are certainly seeing you do this, but that's the lesson, is you break it down. And that's part of why the title of my book has the language step by step in it. It's just, it's a wonderful reminder
Mhm.
that regardless of how hard anything is, you can get through the cold, wet, rainy weather. You'll
Mhm.
get to a place that's safe. And the only way to do that is really honoring each step.
Mhm.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of lessons in it.
Yeah. And there's a ton of lessons in it. And when the weather is, eh, when I don't feel comfortable taking the girls out in the weather,
Yeah.
I'll just go by myself.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, total transparency, if Lily is napping, she's in her crib, I know she's safe and I know she's fine. Gracie
Yeah.
and Olivia are totally fine to be in the home by themselves, and I'll just walk outside. I'll just go
Right.
outside.
Around the
I'll
house.
walk
Yeah.
around the house. I'll walk to the shop. I'll walk just out on the county road, but I can still see our home, and they're
Yes.
fine. They put a show on. They know the rules of the house. We're home all the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And I do it, and I do it for myself. I'll also get up in the mornings. I've done that a few times where I've got up in the mornings. Brad's come home from work and I'm like, I need a walk. I'll go for a walk. So my point is I don't always take the girls. Sometimes
Sure.
I need that meditative space for myself, for
Absolutely.
clarity, cleansing, You talk about this a lot, and I think it's beautiful for our creativity. We tap into this abundance of creativity when we have the space to do it. And walking for me is one of the best places for me to do that, and taking baths too, again, like with intention. So let me ask you, as we're talking about tapping into creativity and finding that kind of meditative practice within movement, do you listen to music, podcast, stories, or is it always completely quiet?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the honest answer is it's probably a third, a third, a third. When I first started out, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and I hadn't sort of fine-tuned my walks, meaning I just went out and I was outside, and I was kind of just happy to be outside. And slowly I began to realize that to take the headphones off, to get into the quiet, I was more tuned in. So that just took a little bit of time for me to figure out. I will say during the pandemic, I took everything out of my ears. I didn't want any noise. I wanted just really a very spacious kind of time. And it was actually, I always say there's a lot of answers in the quiet. And until you allow that quiet to be part of what you're doing, we get distracted. We're listening to books and the podcasts and music. I'm not really listening and dialing into what my body's telling me. And I think it was really during the pandemic, I thought, A, I don't want to listen to any news. B, it feels a little, it felt a little irresponsible to be listening to, sort of a friendly book on tape when so much seemed so intense. So it was at that time it was probably for about 6 months straight. I didn't listen to anything. I just listened to my own internal conversation and what my body was telling me. And I found it very sort of nourishing.
Right. I absolutely love that. I'm about 50-50. Sometimes I want the creativity space and I need the quiet. And then other times I want to be inspired, or I want to grow and learn. And so that's my opportunity for podcasts or books on tape or something. But when you started doing your walks in the quiet, was that uncomfortable for you after having been surrounded by so much noise and work and everything?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the answer is no, simply because I think the pandemic, there was a lot of external. If the pandemic hadn't happened, and I just sort of decided, oh, I think I'll take I think it would have been hard at that moment. I was craving the quiet. I was. So I think it's a dual answer, which is, had it been another time, I think it would have been hard. I didn't find it to be so. I think just because of the weight of the world, and to take that weight off was sort of a relief. So I guess my answer is no, but that's not to say had I done it another time, the answer would have been different.
Yeah, I think I'm just speaking on after talking to so many moms, and just as a mom now too, with all the noise constantly going on.
Yes.
I think we get a little uncomfortable with the quiet for two reasons, because we're not used to that low of stimulation. And the second thing is that we're afraid to be in our own thoughts sometimes.
Absolutely.
So I encourage moms to kind of do their walks 50-50. Take a walk where you're listening to a beautiful podcast that's going to teach you something. And if you've had a really tough day, take a walk in the quiet. Why was your day tough? Do some reflective work in that space. And then you can actually come back having everything shut down, calm down, cooled down, more present and more grounded within your home. So that was why I asked that, that question, is because
terrific.
Sometimes people don't like to be in their own headspace. They want to. We as a society are too used to being told what we need to think and feel all the time. And as moms, we're so used to thinking and feeling for our children too, that when we have to take a step back and think for ourselves or feel ourselves, it's like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. It's kind of scary.
It is scary. And it's scary because maybe some things pop up that you hadn't that you kind of maybe you felt, but because you were busy, you didn't have to address. So yeah, all sorts
Mhm.
of things can show up in the quiet. You touched on creativity. Given my work, it was also a space where a lot of, say, problems were solved, ideas came into being. So the quiet can also be a really generative place, a
Mhm.
creative place, not just a necessarily reflective, pull apart our ideas place.
Mhm.
So the quiet can be really nourishing and really exciting space. But to
Mhm.
your point, it definitely has the opportunity to be a place where things are challenging. You have to look in the face, you have to see, you have to hear, because nothing's distracting you from listening to that message.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a good point.
Do you consider yourself pretty self-aware? Do you feel like you're a pretty self-aware person?
I would say that the walking has made that so.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say that, to your point earlier, which is a good one, which is, as a mom, as a business owner, as a friend and family member, I think it's really easy to forget to tap into ourselves, to be self-aware, to listen
Mhm.
to those messages, to, daily take a check-in. How am I feeling? What am I attracted to? What am I drawn to? Am I nourishing my whole being? And
Mhm.
it's hard when you're caretaking. So
Right.
I would say self-awareness has been a journey, and it's probably true for all of us. And I would say that it is in the act of walking that I think it was a radical act of self-awareness to remember that I needed to get back outside. So I think
Mhm.
the whole practice started with that.
Mhm.
It would have been easy to just continue on my merry way. Again, there was no problem per se.
Mhm.
It's like, ooh, I'm missing a piece of me. I'm not, I, that would be healing to add that into not that anything was broken, but just be an important component that I haven't been tending to.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. So you talked earlier about, this daily walk it wasn't an active working out. It wasn't to lose weight or get in shape or anything. It was just the beauty of being outside and slowing down amongst a variety of other things. So, but was a side effect of you taking control of this act a healthier life? Did you feel yourself growing stronger? Did you lose weight? Did you feel
mm,
healthier? All of those things. Were there physical positive side effects that came from you being more mentally in tune?
yeah, another great question. I think um, the issue of weight has never been one that I've paid attention to. I guess I'm
Mm-hmm.
fortunate in that way. So I don't know the answer to that, other than to say, I guess over this 10 years, I was perimenopausal, now menopausal. Your body sure does change at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly have a number of friends whose weight fluctuated. Mine hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a result of walking or my DNA? I'm not sure. But the sort of radical change that happens with menopause, I've been really fortunate to have very minimal side effects from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really take anything for it. And I would love to attribute it to the walking. I can't say that I know for sure that that's the case, but let's for the time being say the walking really helped the transition
Yeah.
from perimenopause to menopause, certainly.
Yeah.
Um, I am about to turn 60, as I mentioned, and
We share a birthday month. Your birthday's in
oh,
February, isn't it?
February.
Yeah,
Yes.
mine's the
Yeah.
16th.
Oh,
So,
13.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll text you happy birthday.
Okay, great. And I have to say, I've never really paid attention to my age before. It's not
Mhm.
something I'm worried about. With my gray hair, I've been gray since I was 30. So the sort of concept of how old I was, I think it was very confusing to the world, because I think I looked older even when I was 30 something. I've never dyed my hair. And so I guess the point being that turning 60, um, I feel very nimble. I stretch a lot before and after. I feel very physically healthy.
Mhm.
And my only point for bringing up the gray hair is that I think I probably, looked like a 60-year-old 25 years ago,
Oh
but
gosh.
which is fine. So I guess, certainly help with menopause. Certainly I feel limber. I feel fit.
Mhm.
Am I up for running the marathon? No, but I can go on any hike with anybody at any time for any length of, hours on end. It's
Mhm.
fine. So as far as I'm concerned, at age 60, to feel that vigorous is
Mhm.
awesome.
Mhm.
And every now and then I'll decide, I'm going to run from here. I'm going to run for a mile, and then I
Mhm.
walk for the rest. So
Mhm.
a little bit of cardio. But yeah, I guess those are the primary benefits are certainly physical. There's been a number of studies recently. I guess walking's kind of hot. If you look in the New York Times, they practically have an article a week. And I think there's a lot of studies that now really show the impacts of going for a 20 or 30-minute walk a couple
Mhm.
of times per week are very positive.
Mhm.
Blood pressure, all those kinds of good things.
Yeah, I mean mental health, physical health. I mean, there's a lot of studies, and you actually talk about them a lot in the book too, and
Right.
you relate it, back to the
Mhm.
like the physical and mental benefits of walking, not just the mindset and not just the personal growth and development that comes with it, but also like the physical
That's right. Yeah.
benefits to it, which I absolutely
Mhm.
love. One of the things One of the things that you talked about in the book, I wrote actually down some of the quotes in your book because you're
Oh,
just such a beautiful writer. So,
oh,
all of my listeners,
nice.
I know that I yell at you about going for a walk and tell you to go for a walk, but Libby puts it so much more beautifully and articulately than
Hmm.
I ever could. But so you put in here, and I don't have the page numbers, but you said, I'm someone who walks every morning. The idea of not doing it feels like an act of self betrayal. And so, what we're talking about here is identity. And so my question with that, because I talk about identity a lot, and some people kind of have this idea that you have to change your identity before you can take action, and some people have this idea of
Mm,
action actually changes your identity.
mm.
So how would you feel your identity has shifted, because walking is now a part of you? It is you, it is
Oh,
who you are.
that's
it's
right.
it's more than just an act. It is, and you talk about that in the book, how it's become your identity. So not doing it, like you said, is an act of self-betrayal. So how do you feel like your identity shifted in this way? Did your identity shift before you started and then you acted like, I want to walk, I'm gonna act? Or was it through each step, now you've become
What
who
a
you are
beautiful
today?
question. I think the answer is yes, and right.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
I think probably when I decided and I realized I need to get outside, I knew that it was
Mhm.
going to be a walk because, as I said earlier, the intention wasn't athletic.
Mhm.
And so I don't think at that point I would have said, I'm a walker. I think I would have said, as I just did, I just need to be outside. But
Mhm.
I'm not going to just go sit and read. I'm going to move.
Mhm.
So I think it's after the several years that I would have said to you, I'm a walker. Walking is my thing. Like many runners will say, I'm a runner, right? Or
Mhm.
I'm a hiker. And I have to say, most people laugh when I say I'm a walker, but
Mhm.
I think I might right now say walking is one of the most important things in my life, up there with my career, with parenting. It's a really great question. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit more, but I think I've probably grown into that
Mhm.
definition. I've probably grown into that identity. I'm not sure I would have been wise enough early on to say, walking is going to be the thing that
Mhm.
gets me there. And it's sort of related to momentum. What's a habit? What kind of momentum do you need? And
Mhm.
those are, I think, we've often probably all heard it takes 3 to 4 weeks or something to make something a habit.
Right.
I call this a micro habit, and that's why I chose a month. I was like, oh well, if I do it for a month, maybe it'll become more regular.
Mhm.
Um, But I will say, maybe we all feel this when you've committed to something and you've done it for 2 weeks, the idea of breaking that chain feels like there's not a lot of reason to do that. And then
Right.
this momentum builds. Now I feel like, oh my gosh, if I did, I'd have to say I walked for 10 days and then I stopped for a week and then I started again. So
Yes. Yeah.
that doesn't feel great.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, using your personal example in walking, for me personally, I would say I'm the same with this podcast. So the podcast is
Yes,
still fairly young. I started it in February. It's growing very quickly, which is
it's
amazing.
great.
But I wasn't a quote podcaster when I
Yeah.
started. I knew nothing about editing podcasts or programs, platforms, microphones. Like I knew nothing about it, but I just knew I had a voice and I wanted to do something. Right. And that's the same with you walking. Like you knew you wanted to get outside. So you put one foot in front of the other and you got outside. So I put one foot in front of the other and I slowly
Right.
started taking steps, and I acted quickly. I say slowly, but really I acted quickly and I got after it, because once you feel something in your core, once you
Yes.
recognize I need this in my life and you start taking action, that's where the momentum really goes. But it takes that first step. It takes that first step of building momentum. And now, honestly, I mean, I'm not even a year in. I still don't necessarily consider myself a podcaster, but I feel it as part of me now. And I feel it growing as into more and more of my identity of who I am.
Sure.
And I do feel like sometimes they just talk about people needing to shift their identities and their paradigms before they take action. And I kind of disagree. I feel like if you're interested in something, you take action. If you take a step forward, if you're inspired by podcasting, then start a podcast. If you're inspired by you, Libby, walking, then put your running shoes on and head out the door, and then just consistently keep doing it. And that's, to me, how we make change. That's how we make progress.
Yeah, there's some beautiful quote. I don't remember who said it, but it's something like, how does one get started in doing something? And that, the response is you just start.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to start. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean you have to do something for 10 years. It doesn't mean you have to be a podcaster for 5 years or 10.
Mm-hmm.
You just start.
Right.
And I think the other component is a really generous view of failure. When we hear this word failure, I think everybody thinks, oh my gosh, that's a burden. It is a problem. It is, you've done something that is really not okay. And
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that the only way we know if we want to move forward with something is to try.
Mm-hmm.
And should we, quote unquote, fail, should I stop walking, which is hardly a failure, stop
Mm-hmm.
podcast. It is at that moment that moment where we look at ourselves and say, do we want to keep going? I view failure as that moment when the world asks, okay, do you want to keep going, or is this the end of this chapter? And it's
Mm-hmm.
okay, either way is great.
Yeah.
But those moments of quote what that we define as failure are opportunities to pause and say, do I want to keep going? Do I want to
Right.
identify? Do I want to self-identify as a pod? And should you say no, that's okay too.
Hey, Mama, I wanted to take a second and remind you about the incredible opportunity that my friends at Primally Pure are offering during Black Friday and Cyber Monday. For this limited time only, they're doing 20% off your site-wide purchase if you use Mama Mindset at checkout. This is an incredible opportunity to buy that gift for the mother-in-law you're not sure what to get, or your mother, or your children, or maybe even something for yourself. That is okay to use this discount to buy something for yourself. Their products are amazing. I've talked to you about them before. I use their natural deodorant. I use their oil cleanser. I use their dry shampoo. A perfect stocking stuffer opportunity for you is their chapstick. It's one of my very favorite chapsticks. So don't forget about this incredible opportunity from Black Friday through Cyber Monday for 20% off your site-wide purchase using the discount code Mama Mindset at checkout. And with that being said, let's get back to the show.
I think people get afraid of this concept of quote unquote failure. Well, what if I say I'm a podcaster and then I don't do it? It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. You just
Right.
decide that that's as much as you want to do. You want to do 10 episodes, and that's great.
Yeah. And I'm sure even in that 10 episodes, you learned something though. That's the thing,
Without a
it's
doubt.
like, what do they call that? Failing forward, hashtag fail
Yes.
forward. Because
Yes. Yeah.
even if you quote, like you said, quote, fail or take a step back or stop doing something, you have still gained an experience. You've gained knowledge. You've gained, I mean, you may have made a new friend doing it. I mean, if I were to stop today doing what I'm doing right now with the podcast, I have made so many
Brilliant.
amazing connections.
Brilliant.
And
you just started.
yes,
You just started.
Yep.
Right.
Just took a step forward. Yep.
Just took a step forward.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been very fun. I love this opportunity. I get to talk to amazing people just like yourself and authors, and it's really opening up the doors. And kind of going back to what you're saying, I tell my mom listeners that all the time, try all the things. We get stuck in
There is no failure.
like mom mode, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and I'm feeling in this rut. I'm like, try something. Just try all the things. And if you stop doing it, or if you quit, or if you decide this isn't for you, there is no harm in that. There's no failure. And you're not flighty. I think sometimes in society we say like, you need to choose one thing and you need to be really good at that. And you have to do that one thing, but that's not a really well-rounded person. And as mothers, I'm such an advocate for saying, try all the things, do all the things, experience all the things, because that makes you a well-rounded person, which then in turn makes your children well-rounded people. And that creates diversity in our communities. Right. And we want diversity in our communities. We want unique and different perspectives and different ways of thinking. And the only way they're going to get that is by I would say one of the biggest ways they're going to get that is by the experiences that we have as mothers and us showing 100%. Them different things. So going back to the walking, we want to teach our kids about nature and being outside and getting grounded, all these healthy things. But how are they ever going to learn that if we're not doing it? If they don't see us doing it and we're not taking them to do it, there's something so beautiful about passing that on to our children.
Yeah. And I would argue that it's particularly powerful, I think, for young girls to be outside and maybe not be completely comfortable and know that they're safe and they're okay, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's not a lot of, and I think what it builds is kind of a little bit of a sense of bravery. When you were talking about your girls coming back, you and your girls coming back from a snowy, wintry day and having some cocoa and feeling kind of proud of yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You feel like we did that. Maybe we didn't think we could, but we did. And I just think that is a powerful place for young girls to experiment with the idea of their own power. And, I think so many young girls were all told you're supposed to be quiet and you're supposed to be sweet and you're supposed to be nice. And instead of leaning into the place where you think, I can't do it. And then you do it. And I think to your point, it builds creativity. It builds resilience in our young boys and girls. So it's a powerful attribute.
So I want to go back a little bit. We were talking about identity, and when we were talking about identity, some of the things that we were talking about was consistency, and that's really truly what ends up building that identity is doing, the same thing repetitively, excuse me. Now, how did you stay consistent in doing this without failure every day? I mean, did you get sick? We already talked about the weather. So how did you stay consistent in this act?
Yeah, it was putting down any kind of judgment. So there was one time actually I had pneumonia, and it was the middle of the winter. So I usually get up at the crack of dawn. I have a headlamp on. I go out when it's dark. I'm very fortunate. I feel very safe in my community. I've done this walk. I know people's houses along the way. But on those days when I'm sick, again, it's not about mileage. It's not about pace. My decision when I was sick on those days was to wait until the sun had come up. It was warmer out, really dress, and I literally would go around the block. And to me, quote unquote, it counted because my intention was to honor that practice by getting up and going out. Now, I wouldn't, thankfully I've been basically healthy, so it hasn't been much of an issue.
Mhm.
But it was really about making the decision that I knew I was going to feel better. There has never been a walk that I've gone on that I haven't been felt better when I came back. Never.
Mhm.
Every single time I go out and I come back, even if I'm wet and cold when I come back, I have that sort of sense of, yay, you did it. Even
Mhm.
though you didn't want to. Good for
Right.
you. You did the
Yeah.
hard thing.
Yeah.
And so it was the same when I was sick that time. It's like, good for you. You know what? You still honored that intention. You didn't put yourself, I mean, you know, it wasn't about being tough or trying to muscle through. It was literally around my block. I think I probably took 20 minutes. And I probably didn't even go a quarter of a mile. I
Mhm.
just kind of slowly in the warm sun of the day, it felt nourishing to be up and out and to remember health, that healthy
Mhm.
feeling. So, there's sometimes when I'm traveling and I'll get to the location and I'll do my morning walk in the evening. And as I always tease my friends, you can take a morning walk in the evening because
Yeah.
it's a mindset.
It's
So
morning somewhere.
yeah, that's exactly right. So I think it's a little bit of a generous attitude, right?
Yeah.
I also have to say, whenever I travel and I arrive someplace, the first thing I do is go for a walk to kind of get
Mm.
grounded into the location and the
I've read
neighborhood and
about that. Yeah, it's supposed to help with jet lag and
direction. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So there have been times when, I get up at the crack of dawn, I'm on an airplane, I arrive someplace, and then as I unpack, I put on my walking shoes and go for a walk. So,
Mhm.
the walks vary. For example, tomorrow, Saturday morning, I have this group that I usually meet with. We meet at one parking lot, we walk about 5 miles out and 5 miles back, talk the whole way. It's 10 miles. It's like by the time it's done, we're like, wait a minute, let's do that again. We got more to talk about.
Mhm.
So, they really vary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for some of the mom listeners are thinking, holy cow, 5 miles. I don't know how I would ever get that in, but we've already talked about that. We've already
No,
addressed that it's not
no,
about the distance. It's
yep,
not about the time. It's just
it is
about
not.
getting out and going and just being outside. So I want to ask you, what are the feelings? Can you try and articulate the feeling that you have when you're the only one up at fourth or one of the only people up in your community at 4:30 in the morning or out walking by 5 a.m. because
Oh my
I
gosh.
know that feeling. I know that feeling and it's an incredible feeling, but I want to hear you like try and articulate it because you'll do
Oh,
a
are
much
you
better job
nice?
than me.
Oh, no, I can't wait to hear you say it too. I think, I don't know, I have to say, as a mom, do you remember when your babies were little and they woke up in the morning, they woke up sort of sweetly, but it was just felt like the whole world was quiet except the two of you.
Hmm.
It's sort of like that. So, it's dark. Um, I, as I said, I live in a New England community. So as the fall rolls in, sometimes there's a little smell of, fire or smoke in the air. As I said, I live near the ocean, so it's kind of briny. So, if you tap into all your senses, the sort of fragrance of a morning, I love. I love the sound of a morning, which is quiet.
Hmm.
There's, and as the world starts waking up, you might hear some birds or you hear a school bus or something. So you sort of see the community come to life. You see lights come on and, kitchens and front rooms or front porches. Um, just seeing the sunrise on the tops of the trees. Right. So it's as you tap into every one of your senses, I don't know, it just, um, and there's something about, for me anyway, the fresh start of a day that
Hmm.
the way I always articulate it, the way I feel is welcome to right now. That's
Hmm.
what I feel like. It's like the world is saying, welcome to right now, not in
Hmm.
10 minutes, not tomorrow. Don't worry about later. The world is still sort of dark and waking up. So it's just like there's hardly, you know, very, very alive and present is the feeling that I have. All my
Hmm.
senses are lit up. And if I don't have a bad case of the grumps, I can be very, very attentive and present.
Hmm.
How do you describe it?
Yeah, oh, that's beautiful. I was just very entranced in what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, mine is really, really similar, but I don't always have the opportunity to go in the morning
Yeah.
and by myself.
Yes.
What we're talking about is the type of walk that you get to have kind of by yourself. It's
Mhm.
beautiful when you can take your children, but a lot of what we're talking about is those
Mhm.
quiet times by yourself. And so I've had to do them at night a lot.
Beautiful.
And I take our dog with us. We were talking about safety and things like that.
Yes.
So I do always feel better when he's around. I take him with me. But there is this sense of pride that I feel when I am out at 10 o'clock at night walking by myself when everybody
Powerful.
it's it's so powerful. It is. And I don't mean this to sound, there's probably a better way to describe it or a better word, because I don't want it to sound like I'm better than anybody, but
Oh
it is
gosh, no.
so powerful to know that the choices that I'm making are so good, and it's so encouraging to keep gaining that forward momentum, in that everybody else is at home watching Netflix and I'm out here experiencing this beautiful sky. The stars at night just light up that cool, crisp night when everybody else is winding down and or getting their heads filled with television or chaos or whatever that's going on in the world. You can just know that all you have right now is just you and the earth and the sky and the air and my dog, and you're just walking and breathing. I love it when you can see your breath, because
Ah,
it's such a
so nice.
visual. It's so nice. It's this visual in and out. You can see your aliveness and your alertness. And so our house sits above the town, so I can
Mm,
see the town.
mm,
And I just feel like this sort of sense of empowerment where I just feel
totally.
so alive in I'm living right now. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that nobody else is living, but it makes you
Mm-mm.
question, are you living? Are you really
Mm,
living? Because I'm out here experiencing this and living this, and it makes me very grateful for the opportunity. Every time I walk like that, I'm so
totally.
grateful for the opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you said, it awakens all of your senses, and it builds confidence. That's a whole other, like, that's a thing we haven't even really talked about.
100%.
But it's this confidence builder. And as moms, that's something, as new moms, as moms of young
Totally.
children, you're lacking in this confidence and this purpose and this self-worth. And when if you do not go outside in the middle of the night and you're like, it's 9 o'clock, or in the morning when nobody is up, and don't feel confident or valued or self-worth, and we need to dig a little deeper, mama, but
Yeah. Yeah.
if you go out there and you do that, you will feel so empowered and confident and valuable, and you'll feel all of that positivity within you.
Well, and I would also say it is, as you know, I've used this word, it's really healing and it's really nourishing. And I think moms
Mm-hmm.
spend a lot of time nourishing and healing others, and forgetting to do that for ourselves. And yeah, it's a very, very powerful time. And it's really important, to your point, I'm in a very different stage in life where I have, 2 hours to go walk 8, 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started, my kids were teenagers. So I really acknowledge that having that kind of time is an incredible privilege. And I will say, again, just really want to reinforce 15 minutes. If you have
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes, and even, a friend of mine said, you know what I started to do? I started to instead of driving my kids to the bus stop, we walked, and I
Mm-hmm.
would take an extra loop on the way home. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, awesome. She also said, you know what I did when I would go to the grocery store, I park as far away from the front door as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be these big monumental get out in the morning headlamp kind of scenarios. That's what it is
Right.
for me.
Right.
I think if I'd started 20 years ago, it would have looked very different. It would have just migrated as time went on.
Mm-hmm.
There's a woman that who I really adore. I invite everybody to look at on Instagram. Her name is Alex_L, and
Mm.
she's a beautiful writer, and she started her practice about 50 days ago, and she's been documenting it as
Oh, yeah.
she has little kids,
Mhm.
and she, like you, often has been taking her daughters with her. And I think just recently she was very much in the practice of, it doesn't matter how far, but I think she walks maybe a mile a day,
Mhm.
and has been really documenting how impactful and meaningful it's been for her, and
Mhm.
especially the impact on her body, the impact on her mental health. And so she's probably a better role model than I am at that life stage.
Mhm.
And so I just encourage people to, I'm not sure how long she intends to do it, but she's really showing a beautiful way to sort of weave it into life in
Mhm.
a way that's very different from my life stage.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
I love that. And I want to say, even in your book, though, you give really great practical tips that even a mom with young children, I mean, you in no way, shape, or form say that it needs to be this, like you said, 10-mile walk or monumental event or anything. And so you do a great job of articulating that in the book as well. And I'm definitely going to check out that woman. I'm really
mhm,
excited to follow her on Instagram. And I'll say,
mhm,
from kind of piggybacking on that and going a little bit further for us in a personal example, we do have, when I walk on our bike path here in our local community for
mhm,
children, from my experience as a mother, we have to have an end. Like there has to be, well, how far are we walking?
mhm.
When are we stopping?
Good
Otherwise,
point.
they're always
Yes.
going to ask,
Yep.
or is our 10 minutes up?
Mhm,
Is 45 minutes up? And so on the path, and it doesn't matter how long it takes us to get there, a lot of the times, unless I know it's going to be a short walk, most of the time, I never say always as a mother, because that's like, it almost
mhm,
impossible.
mhm.
But we almost always walk to a specific marker. And then we turn around and it's 1 mile. And then we turn around and we walk back. So we get 2 miles in, and they know where
Perfect.
the marker is. It's visual. We go we start from the same spot almost every time. So
Yep.
if you have young kids,
It's a
ru-
great
yeah,
recommendation. Yeah.
routine is so important for young kids sometimes, I think. And at least my daughters do really well on a routine. So they know where we start. There's a bathroom. We go to the bathroom. We make sure we have our water and we go. You get to the 1 mile mark. If they want to go further, we judge it at that point. We take
Mhm,
everything into consideration, all variables, whether, how they're feeling, etc.
mhm,
And then we determine, do we want to go a little bit further today, or do we want to turn around and go back? And I let them ride their bikes sometimes. I
Sure.
I let them ride their scooters sometimes. And
Mhm,
so for us, it's the intentionality of getting outside and either being together, if that's what we're going to do as a mom and her kids, or if I'm going to go out by myself, it's just the intentionality of getting out there. So that's just something maybe we can, moms can use as a tip. If
Beautiful.
we're not
Yeah.
going 10 miles, just find your
Yeah.
marker, stick to that. Maybe that's your path you take every time. And that's a great way to try and stay, if you want to make it a daily habit with your kids, that's a great way to do it. Try and do it at the same time every day, after breakfast or whatever. We're going for our 1 mile walk, and you start and you stop, and it's so good for the kids to know that consistency too. And it helps us as moms stay consistent. So I know you talk in your book, and we can talk about that a little bit. We've touched on it, but you've talked about kind of habit stacking in
Mhm.
order to be successful. And I've talked about that on the podcast. So can you share with us what you do and how you kind of habit stack to find your consistency, at least early on? I would say it's
Yeah.
probably
No,
not a
it's great.
problem now, but
Yeah, I love that phrase, habit stacking. So I always talk about, I wanted to eliminate any friction or hurdles between waking and walking. So when I wake and when I head out the door, I want to make sure or especially early on, I wanted to
Mhm,
make sure there was an opportunity to say, well, you know what, my shoes are wet, or my toes are cold, whatever it is.
mhm,
And so each day I would just try and identify, where was it where there was a little bit of friction, and what could I do to eliminate any of that?
mhm,
Um, I am someone who is always cold. So when I started walking in the winter, I needed to be very intentional about, I'll call it my walking kit. And
mhm,
I got to a place where I can look at my weather in the morning and know how many layers to put on. I have to say, I always carry with me a little bit of chocolate, even in the morning.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
Warm toes or something for me that really mattered. So I don't know if those are particular habits, but they were important places where it was easy for me to say, oh, forget it. I mean, I didn't, but it was easy for my mind to take over and say, oh, well, your toes are going to get cold. And I guess the most critical thing for me really was saying, you have no outs. You're committed for a month. So it wasn't this sort of, oh, I hope I find 3 days here and there. That ought to be good. No, every day. And, so I don't know if that answers your question, but
No,
it was
does.
really,
Yeah.
really about trying to find the sort of gear that works. And, sort of having my tea already when I come back. Oh, I know it's waiting. And just go to bed early, get up early, get after it. And
yeah, you really set yourself up for success. And I've talked to my mom listeners about that too. Like things that you can do at night to set yourself up for success in the morning. Cause they're, a lot of people are like, I don't want to get out of bed. My bed is cozy. And I've heard people call this their bitch voice. You definitely write about it more eloquently in the book, but it's essentially your bitch voice, where you're that noise in your head, that woman in your head telling, your bed is so cozy, your bed is so warm, just stay in here, you've earned it, you deserve it, you're a busy mom, all of those things. But
and it's all true.
And
it's all true.
Yes,
it's all true. There's no reason not to believe her. Again, she's convincing, she's smart, she's sexy, she knows what's going on. And again, I'll just reiterate that is on those days when I almost talk myself out of it, that I just now know that's the most powerful thing. I will say to you that I've recently I've started cold plunging with a bunch of women. We get in the cold water.
Oh my gosh,
I know.
I love it. Yeah.
And so I've sort of relearned the practice of starting something new, kind of this beginner's practice. And that is a practice where every single time, all of us, today we had 15 people get in the water. I think it was about 15 people. The driving there, we were all like, oh, what are we doing? This is crazy. We hate it. We don't want to. And yet it is in commitment to each other also that eliminates that friction. So sometimes you can say, to somebody else, should we walk together Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Let's just have it as a standing commitment. And if you have to tap out, that's fine. But it is having that accountability partner that is also really super helpful. Certainly helpful for me in this cold plunging.
Yeah.
So cold.
Yeah. As long as it's a healthy relationship, and that if for some reason you have to go into it telling yourself, if your accountability partner has to stop for whatever reason, then you're still going to go. Like you're still going to go.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I love that.
Because you're really accountable to yourself most profoundly.
Right.
And that's ultimately the message, is that you owe it to yourself, not the other person. That being said, sometimes a little bit of community can be a source of a little bit of a push, a little momentum. As I said, my Saturday morning group, I don't view them as accountability partners anymore. I just can't wait to see them because we don't see each other. So
you built that relationship. Nice. So speaking of community and accountability, I mean, Libby, you have this incredible community that's following you now that you've, grown. I'll just say organically, just because you've done something as simple as walking, but you're also, in marketing in the digital world. So can you talk to me about that? Like, growing this community. And then I want to see how that makes you feel. I want to know how that makes you feel, because you're such an inspiration for so many people now, and this movement that you've kind of started.
You're very kind. I'm not sure I know how to receive the fact that I've started this movement. I'm still stumbling on that, because I honestly, I am so happy when somebody writes me and says they've started a walking practice. So that feels lovely, but I think I don't see it in a larger way. So
Mhm.
as I said, I was in advertising when I started walking. I decided actually a key component of it was, again, I was 49 years old. As a
Mhm.
female in advertising at age 49, you are obsolete. You're basically a dinosaur.
Mhm.
And so I thought the only way to stay relevant was actually to really embed myself and understand social media.
Mhm.
My clients demanded it of me, and the way I learn is by actually doing it. So part of my practice, actually, again, I'm an art director, so I'm in charge of the visuals,
Mhm.
was to actually take a picture every single day and post it. It wasn't
Mhm.
for anybody, and the pictures were crappy. I mean, they're terrible, but it was nothing other than my accountability to myself, which is like
Mhm.
coming back and journaling. If you're an athlete, you probably write in your journal about
Mhm.
how it went. And so every day I would take a picture, and I was often taking the same loop. I was going past this one barn, and as I said in the book, it actually, this practice really taught me how to see, not just look. So
Mhm.
in the real world, you just sort of, you look at things, but you don't pause enough to see. And I remember coming to this one moment where I looked at this barn. It was like almost a friend at this point. I had been walking for a couple of months, and I was like, that barn looks different every single day. And unless I walk past it at walking speed, I'd never notice it.
Mhm.
Like, of course, the light is different, the weather's different, the way the moonlight's on it,
Mhm.
or my internal weather. So I would take a picture, and it was in that practice of looking, seeing, and recording a picture each day, that actually I became a better art director in many ways, because I really learned how to see things.
Mhm.
That's how I started. So I started Instagram 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And I had I still think of it this way. I don't think anybody's looking at anything. I post it all for myself.
Mhm.
And that's the only reason I do it, is to sort of document and remember it. Um, and so when you say, I don't know, I'm still sort of, I think, living into this notion of, maybe there's this little tiny movement afoot.
Yeah.
I think, but I haven't really embraced it, to be perfectly honest. But thank you for the kind words.
Yes.
If I can inspire anybody to walk, or if you can, or if we can,
Mhm.
I think the world's a better place. So,
Yeah.
um, my world in the digital space came out of a real requirement for my job to learn more
Mhm.
about that world.
Mhm. Mhm. So the side effect of that is that we all get to be inspired every single day.
Fair
Um,
enough.
I mean, by your consistency, I think that's honestly, I mean, walking in and of itself is beautiful, but I think the most, in my personal opinion, one of the most inspiring things about what you have accomplished is your consistency to stay with it.
Mm,
And that is a promise, that's a consistency that you've made for yourself. That
mhm,
is not something that you've done for a challenge or a program or with a partner or anybody. This is the ultimate commitment that you've made to yourself. And to me, that's what's so beautiful about your journey. Is I think it gives us all hope that I can choose to change my life and I can stick with it. It's
mhm.
possible. I can choose to change my identity. I can choose to
That's
make a
right.
positive change and stick with it. It
Mhm,
really is possible as long
mhm.
as you squash the bitch voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell her to go back to bed. I'm going out for a
Yeah.
walk. That's sometimes what I
Yeah.
say out loud. I'm like, I hear you. I
Mhm.
hear you. Why don't you tuck back into bed? I'll see you
Mhm.
when I come back from my walk.
Yes. So did you also, so you said you kind of, your way of journaling was taking a picture, but did you also journal every day too? Did you write as well?
I I didn't. I don't think of
Mhm.
myself as a writer. Again,
Mhm.
in my world, I would partner with people who are writers. I have friends who are incredible authors. So talk about identity. I don't think of myself as an author at
Oh yeah.
all.
Okay.
I am not a writer.
Uh-huh.
I Sure, I wrote a book, but it was really more of telling a story, I guess.
Mhm.
So no, I didn't really journal. And that's not to say, I think that's just because my practice, my way of learning in the world is visual. And so the taking of the picture was as much, and in fact, usually when I post a picture, I pair it with a quote that I find, and often they're not even my own words, right? So just recently I had a friend, she was like, you might want to think about putting some of your own words in your caption on your Instagram, like, let us in a little bit. And so I've started doing that, and that's very recent. But so the truth of the matter is, no, I don't have a journal where I've written down what happened. I just scroll back through my Instagram and I'm like, oh, remember that day? And
yeah. But I love that. I love that you have the visual journal and the visual reminder, because that is, I just think that that's such a great idea that you took advantage of that. Now you have this 10 years of all of it, which is amazing.
It's crazy. Yeah. I know.
Okay. So I want to touch on one thing really quick, because for selfish reasons, I want to ask you about this, but I also have another like woo thing that happened with me finding you in Magnolia Journal. And I actually meant to say this at the beginning when we were starting to record, but so Cheryl Strayed did oh my gosh, what do you call it? I just lost the word, your intro or your dedication at the beginning of the book. And you talked about that in Magnolia Journal. Also, you mentioned her, or maybe it was quoted. I think she was quoted in Magnolia Journal. Anyways, so the day before I picked up this article, I'm not kidding you, I watched Wild.
Yeah, you did.
I watched the movie, and I haven't watched it in years, but I stayed up late, and I try not to stay up late. I shouldn't say I've never, but I stayed up late because I was so engrossed in her. I watched it before, but I was just so engrossed in this movie. And total confession and transparency, I've never read the book, but I'm incredibly inspired to read her book now after watching the movie again, because it's been several years since I watched it. And so I want to read her book. So I watched the movie, picked up the journal, read your article, saw she was mentioned in there, had all the goosebumps, all the feels. It was a sign from the universe, and then, when I pick up your actual book, when I got it in the mail, she wrote, these beautiful words. So did you meet her before you had wrote the book? Were you guys friends before? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this is why I don't call myself an author, because Cheryl Strayed is a true author. She is.
I have to read her book. I just need to.
Yeah, you do. She, aside from being just sort of instinctually very wise about human beings, she has a beautiful capacity to put human feeling, emotion, thought, intimacies into language. She does such a beautiful job. So I've been very fortunate to know Cheryl. In fact, we just did an event together up at our beautiful friend's winery up in Hopland, California, together. And we talked about walking, as she was very kind to join me in that. And what we talked about in that session in June was she really took this big epic walk, right? Like this big monumental 1,000-mile walk. And I take this micro daily practice walk, and how they're profoundly similar and how they're very different, but how the act of walking is in fact, let's call it universal for us able-bodied individuals. And so how did I meet her? I met her at a beautiful event called the Do Lectures, and the Do Lectures are the publishers of the book. So the Do Lectures are something I like to describe as TED Talks meets Burning Man with a splash of oil. The wild things are.
Yeah.
And it's a weekend where people gather, and there's probably about a dozen people who give talks. No PowerPoints really. It's just, and Cheryl was someone who spoke one year. And when people speak, they then stay on campus, so you all get to know each other. And we have a mutual friend, so we spent some time together, and I think we'll be giving a talk together this upcoming summer. Yeah, everybody should read Wild. It's beautiful. You should also get her newsletter, Dear Sugar. She's brilliant writer.
I'll have to remember that too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yes, of course, watch Wild, the movie as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. I was thank you for answering that for me. I
oh, of
know
course, yeah,
I didn't know if that
yeah.
was going to be too personal of a question, how people make connections, but I just thought I just have to ask her this because it is just too coincidental that the universe put this movie, in front of me and I chose to watch this. And then the next day I open this book or open this magazine and I read this article and then I buy your book. And I mean, it's just like all the
Yeah,
universe was talking to me. It's very interesting. So who knows where that will lead me, but I think it's beautiful that you
love it.
guys made that
Yeah.
connection, and I'll have to look into I didn't realize I'll have to look into those talks because I didn't realize that this is a whole
Series.
series. It's a whole
Yeah.
series. Yeah. So for listeners,
Yeah, you can go find Cheryl's talk on the
yeah.
dolectures.com website. And yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's in the back, which this is a perfect sized little book. It feels good in your hand. Like I don't want to oversell it here, but I was like, wow, I
Yeah,
really like this style of book. There's
little
you
stocking
guys,
stuffer.
yeah, it's great. And then I looked at the back and there's a whole list back here of all of the other do series, which was such a
Yeah, they're meant to be
beautiful.
little sort of guidebooks. They're not
Yeah.
really big books per se. They're meant to
Yeah.
be, in a way, how-tos. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a whole series. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's something that I really want the listeners to understand too, is that it is a how-to book, but it's a how-to book with the emotion behind it and your story and your journey. So it's a
Mhm.
very it's a great, like you said, a stocking stuffer, but anyways, I don't want to oversell it on here. I just love it. And I think
Nice.
it's so great. And so Libby, is there anything, I had so many questions I want to talk to you about, and we hit on so many things, but is there anything that we didn't talk about that you absolutely love to share with people in your journey, your experience?
No, I think it's back to how you beautifully articulated. Just start,
Mhm.
right? And grant yourself the grace and space of defining whatever it is that you want to commit to, so that you can do it,
Mhm.
right? So that there isn't some big barrier to accomplishing that consistency. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, go for a walk. Hashtag this morning walk so I can see and give you a hug when I
Yes.
see anybody out for going for a walk. And on my website, thismorningwalk.com, actually, there's a lot of pictures of Cheryl there. I think I put some. I can't remember if I posted it already, but recommendations for what to wear when you walk in the winter. So hopefully,
Mhm.
there's some really useful tidbits, and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, if anybody has any questions. But keep it simple. That's the
Mhm.
thing. Keep it simple. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the parts that are even a little bit, kind of a pain in the neck, and see what learning there is underneath the sort of discomfort. One of my new favorite quotes is by a fellow named, what's his first name? Nick Carnassus. He's an ultra marathon runner. I'm not sure that's
Mm.
his first name. In any case, he says, don't make sure you don't confuse comfort with happiness.
I think I've heard that one. Mhm.
And what I love about that is we've all gotten very comfortable in our bodies, and we're
Mhm.
very fortunate. I mean, that comes from a place of privilege. I understand that very precisely.
Mhm.
And make sure that you're tapping into what makes you happy. And for me, I guess, to come full circle, what makes me happy was to be outdoors
Mhm.
and moving.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's not so comfortable. Sometimes
Mhm.
think I want to rather be inside in the warm house, but I know that
Mhm.
that's not where that's not where I'm most lit up or most alive. And
Mhm.
heaven forbid you get to 60 years old and you haven't really been alive. So
Yeah.
that's, I think,
I
where I
think
am.
I think happiness a lot of times is the byproduct of discomfort. I
Yes,
think that it is,
100%.
yeah, I think it's
Mhm.
the side effect that happens after you get a little uncomfortable. And so I always tell, and you quote that in here too, you quote that in your book, you can do
Mhm.
hard things. You can
Mhm.
do hard things and you can overcome them. And so Libby, thank you so much for your
Oh my
wisdom and sharing
gosh.
your experience in this journey. And I'll make sure to put all of your website and your Instagram on the show notes so people can reach out to you so they don't have to rewind and go back. But yeah, just thank you so much again. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us.
Well, thank you for sharing yours with me. And I'm so happy to know you're out there walking. And that's the other thing I have to say, getting up early in the morning, every now and then, I know others who are up doing it too. And I think of them, and that's really beautiful. I love it. So now I'll be
Yes.
thinking of you
Yes.
and your
Yay.
listeners.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Libby. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, sweet mama. Thank you so much for listening to today's incredible episode with Libby. I hope this inspires you to get out and move today, to get out and be outside and go for a walk, transport and transform your mindset, transport and transform your emotional energy that you have today. The power of the walk is profound. The experience that you have when you're outside and especially when you stay consistent with the walk, it's profound. It's a profound experience. I have experienced it on more of a micro level, as I talk about in the episode that you heard. Libby has experienced it on more of a macro level with the consistency that she's had for a decade. So I hope this brings you encouragement. I hope this leaves you feeling inspired. If you would like to follow Libby, she has a beautiful Instagram page, which we talked about. I'll put that in the show notes below. Also, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about walking or her journey. She is an open book, incredible, inspiring woman. So, and again, if you found value in today's episode, if you enjoyed today's episode, if I did a good job on today's episode, please share it. There are no fees for this podcast. It's absolutely free. And the only thing that I ask is you help a mama out, you help a sister out, and you just give it a share and let the world know, this community that we're building. And this conversation with Libby can be applied to anybody, any woman, any female, any male, anybody in the world could listen to this and feel inspired to make a change in their life. So if it left you feeling inspired, please give me a share today. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting this community. I look forward to talking to you all again very soon.